Good day, everyone. I am Fiona Taasan from the LaSalle University Integrated School, Senior High School, and I will be presenting my paper titled Sa Likod ng Paghahabi, a picture book based on the Lumad community's narratives regarding the prevailing conflicts against their human rights. So just to give a brief introduction and background to the subject matter, the coronavirus disease, or COVID-19, has greatly afflicted the Philippines' economic system. Despite the public health crisis, which led to the halting of major industries, some industries like agriculture, food and manufacturing, mining, continue to push through. Before the pandemic, the country was pretty engaged in the world market, but even so, it is still said that the Philippines has poor economic growth performance because of stagnant industrialization, seen from high unemployment rates, slow poverty reduction, and stagnant investments. This has caused a strong push for industrialization, more so now in a time like this, leading to the approval of mining and logging companies in Mindanao's ancestral domains. Now, this has caused issues for the Lumad community, and one of them is the militarization in their own lands. This militarization is believed to be backed up by the intention of this push for industrialization. However, this is denied by the armed forces of the Philippines, claiming that their reason of going to their ancestral lands is to protect the Lumad community from the New People's Army or the communists. The conflicts they have experienced, like encroaching companies, deprivation of education, being caught in between crossfires, and their disregarded demands of autonomy, have even aggravated amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. An example of this is the recent news of Lumad individuals who were taken into custody by the PNP in Cebu last month of February. This has produced two opposing sides, wherein the PNP claims this as a rescue operation, while human rights advocates call this a raid. Now, this research paper questions, why are the Lumad's conflicts, specifically the Monobo tribes, still not yet resolved? This is also the content of the artistic output that I will be creating. So to answer this, information from literature, webinars, and an interview was gathered to come up with an objective discourse. I, as a student from Laguna, am truly an outsider in regards to this subject matter. So it is really crucial to gain perspective and narratives from individuals of the Manoba tribe. So to summarize the critical discourse, it is found that the Lumad's conflicts, including the Agusan Manobo tribes, still is not resolved because of the dominant desire for economic growth through the push of industrialization in untouched land in rural areas that is filled with natural resources, like minerals and trees. The Lumad community's past and current conflicts revolve around the intrusion of ancestral lands and systematic discrimination, all under the problem of their human rights being violated by dominant groups. These conflicts stem from the collective yearning of other groups for land, which is abundant in Mindanao, but is the place of living for the Lumad community. Their violated human rights are prevalent up to this day, even with the presence of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, because the state prioritizes globalization, which is the Western influence definition of economic progress. This overall conflict experienced by the community can be termed as development aggression. It parallels with global occurrences that denies the indigenous people's basic human rights. Now, the Lumad community is not fully against industrialization now, nor development. What they are against is the rights-denying developmental process. What the community prefers is the self-determined development, wherein the community defines what is important and what they prioritize within their community. So now, onto the output itself. I am creating a children's picture book with a story that revolves around the topic of human rights and the Lumad community. The category of picture book is the most befitting category for art creation because it primarily utilizes visual illustrations for storytelling. Additionally, a creative writer is outsourced and commissioned for the text and words of this output. This output's targeted audience start from 5-year-olds and above, meaning that this output is not necessarily limited to children. The concept and message of this output is open to the interpretation and consummation of a mature or older audience because this prevailing conflict for human rights is an issue that needs to be addressed and acknowledged by the common public. A short disclaimer, this picture book is still a work in progress. Its creation is currently ongoing and is expected to be finished by the month of May. For now, I will be presenting the established storyline for this output. It will start with a young Manobo girl happily practicing her traditions, like weaving, to show the beauty of their cultural identity. The elements of nature and agriculture will also be seen in the book, for these are also part of the community's cultural identity. She also happily learns and participates in the progress of agriculture in her community's farms, realizing that although it is challenging, there is a sense of fulfillment and self-reliance found in the nurturing of agriculture. However, despite characterizing their culture as beautiful, this dominant perception of them actually causes systematic discrimination towards the Lumad community. The narrative will then transition to the young Manobo girl discovering that the nature she values is now taken over by chopped down trees, barren lands, and big machines. So she turns to the people whom she thought had the voice to represent the community's complaints. One by one, she meets an industrial worker, a military officer, and a government official, individuals whom she thought she could trust. However, they will reason out that this is for the benefit of the country's economy, and the complaints of the little girl resulted to the community being chased out of their homes. This story does not end there. The young Manobo girl is seen in a new farm in a larger area filled with abundant crops, and this scene ends the story with the idea that farming is a way of protest, a way of progress, and a way of protecting their sacred ancestral lands. The illustrations for the book will be created in a landscape orientation, so it also highlights the environment and surroundings of the characters. The whole page will have elements of nature, making it seem that the main character is a small person within the big environment. Presented here are the color palettes used for the illustrations. At the start of the book, the colors would be vibrant, saturated, and warm, like what is seen on the left. However, as the story progresses, the colors would transition to dull, dark, and cold, like what is seen on the right. Presented here are sample pages, sketches, concept art of what the finished output is based on. Another thing to note is that the main character's clothing is inspired by the colors and patterns of the Bagobo in Nabal. It is important to note this because this pattern's intellectual property is owned by them. All references and sources are detailed in the bibliography of the paper itself. So that is my research and output so far. Once again, this is Sa Likod ng Paghahabi, a picture book based on the Lumad community's narratives regarding the prevailing conflicts against their human rights. Thank you so much for listening.